There's a gap between what customers say and do, which has caused quite a debate around whether we should listen to them at all, especially with the abundance of data and AI. But we know that customer intelligence is a powerful source of competitive advantage and value creation. And the gap is increasing between the amount of customer information and an organization's ability to act on it. So there's still a lot of value, but you have to know how to ask and interpret.
I just want to take a look more deeply at what exactly consumer sentiment is, how it's developed over time, and why perhaps it's become such a controversial, a hot topic.
Well, consumer sentiment means many things to many people, which is part of the confusion. Some of the well-known indicators are asking consumers how they feel or what they expect about the economy. And we've shown that's not so predictive. Recently, people across many countries showed lower confidence in their market's economic outlook, and yet they're still spending. One of my undergraduate majors was economics, and I wouldn't say I can anticipate economic shifts. So why would we expect consumer sentiment to be correlated with the macro indicators? And if you take, for example, our most recent global consumer radar in June, macro sentiment was negative in many markets, but in more than 2/3 of countries, consumers were still expected to spend as much or more. On the other hand, though, consumers' confidence in their personal income, their financial stability, their savings, that's more differentiated among those who spend more versus less, maybe 2 to 3 times more. This is the world versus my world paradox that we talk about. When we look at aggregated sentiment, we should be looking at the closer in indicators that consumers know better.
So what can consumers really tell us then, or tell businesses? What can we learn? And where does that insight typically fall short?
Consumers can tell us a lot of rich information about their most recent or very specific decisions, things they can recall, what they did, what they were solving for, what they traded off. They can also tell us their perceptions, their delighters, and pain points with different options and brands in the market today. And we can get good information if we ask them to thoughtfully prioritize within that context of a specific, recent, and memorable decision, what they needed. In some of our longtime research, we see these emotional needs relatively consistent over time, while the context and the competitive environment, the options you have for how those needs are met, those change. Insight often falls short, though, when we ask the wrong questions or we expect people to self-report complex motivations or predict the future. We have to analyze and interpret it, not ask it directly.
So how much then is that gap due to what we ask or how we ask it, or indeed who we ask?
Honestly, it matters both what you ask and how you ask it. And of course, who you ask if it's a representative group for whatever you're looking to. Because if I ask only my friends what they want from something, we don't necessarily reflect everyone, right? Or if you ask only your customers, you might miss the market or the non-customers that you could have. So we need to ask the right questions for the specific business problem at hand. It takes many different inputs and robust analysis to get to strategic answers that we need. Again, not just asking a customer, what are you going to do in the future? They can't predict it. So how we ask, how we translate it matters a lot in driving insight to strategy and the impact for companies.
As a finance journalist, one thing I say very often is retail therapy is a thing, by which I mean that emotion plays an enormous role in how people behave. And you've touched on it earlier when you said we have values, but sometimes reality bites, it gets in the way, and that's inevitable. So how much does emotion really shape what we buy? And do most business, do you think, truly understand that?
You're absolutely right. And emotion plays a much bigger role than companies realize. Certainly, there's the impulse or the kind of craving that might be playing out in your retail therapy example. But I talk to lots of financial services, telecommunications, insurance, and other companies, and they like to tell me that they don't see differentiation in the market or they worry because it's commoditized. While some categories certainly have more functional than truly emotional needs, more like convenience or cutting edge versus prestigious and confidence boosting. But there are usually at least a few different groups, we call them demand spaces, and opportunities for companies to differentiate and tailor their offerings for these distinct bundles of needs. And we've shown that being the first top of mind associated with the emotional and functional need for a demand space is much more predictive of sales than customer recommendation scores, unaided awareness, or other metrics that companies track. So that emotion is really important to understand.